It started with a rumor and a screenshot. Mira found an old forum thread about a shuttered amusement park out by the quarry, closed after a storm peeled the roof off the arcade. Someone posted a satellite view with a comment that said, "At night you can still hear the carousel." Theo replied with the only 3 words he ever needs to make a bad idea official: "We should go." Val said she was only coming to supervise, which is what people say right before they end up holding a flashlight with both hands and whispering, "This is a terrible plan," while walking in first. We met at the 24-hour gas station where the hot case always has exactly 1 chicken tender left, no matter what time it is. Theo brought zip ties and a tiny first aid kit he called Hope in a pouch. Mira carried a camera with an ancient shoulder strap that squeaked when she moved. Val wore an orange beanie that made her look like a safety cone with opinions. I grabbed water, 2 granola bars, and the feeling I was going to be the only one saying, "Guys, wait," every 10 seconds. The highway out of town is the kind that pretends to be straight until you realize it's slowly bending you somewhere weird. We let the radio hunt for stations while we passed billboards so faded they were basically haiku. Theo drove with his shoulders relaxed, which is never a good sign. Mira scrolled through old posts about the park and read them out loud. Employees used to take a secret tunnel from the maintenance shed to the carousel, and security stopped coming after they chained the gate. Val said, "Chain doesn't mean guarded," and somehow made that sound ethical. The road to the park peeled off at a broken reflector and a mailbox without a house. We killed the headlights and coasted the last 50 yards because that's what cowards with a survival instinct do. The entrance sign had lost enough letters to read Sun Harbor as Unharbor, which felt like an omen or a warning depending on your belief system. The parking lot was a cracked plain where stubborn weeds staged a slow rebellion. The fence leaned inward like it was tired of its job. Theo found a panel that had been bowed out by weather or boredom and eased it back with the kind of care you give a sleeping dog. We slipped inside and stood very still, listening. The park breathed. Not loudly, just the kind of drifting sound a place makes when it remembers it used to be noisy. Myra's camera clicked and popped in that way older cameras do when they're settling in. She whispered, "If anything asks for my soul, I'm offering $3 and a coupon." Val said, "Offer it a granola bar, that's all we brought anyway." I said, "Let's stay in sight lines and not split up," which is what horror movies taught me right before they ignored me. The midway had warped boards that turned every step into a question. A cotton candy stand with its sign half peeled back showed a mouthful of screws where a mascot used to smile. A line of midway games hunched under fading awnings like old men pretending to nap. The Ferris wheel rose behind it all, a rusted halo. We stared at it for a while because it looked like a clock that forgot which direction time runs. $5 says it still moves, Theo said. $5 says tetanus, Val said. Mira took a long exposure shot and muttered, "If it does move, I want it on film." We left the wheel for later because pretending there might be later is how you trick yourself into staying. The roller coaster station was a low platform with a roof that had lost a third of its shingles to storms and boredom. The cars were still on the track, sun-bleached, foam coughing out of seams, lap bars stuck open like the punchline to a joke. Theo climbed into the front seat and said, "On today's episode of Decisions That Look Smarter from Far Away," he mimed pulling the lap bar down and made a clicking noise with his tongue. Nothing moved. Good, I thought. Good and done. Then a speaker crackled. It wasn't close. Not a whisper right behind you crackle. It came from the rafters of the station, from a corner where a metal cone hung like a bat. 3 notes of a chime stuttered, the kind they play before a safety announcement. A voice followed, wobbly, warbled by time, too calm. "Please keep your hands and feet inside the car at all times." We froze so hard I swear even the dust paused. Mira turned the camera toward the speaker and took a photo because sometimes the only way out of being scared is to make it proof. Theo swallowed and said, "We're leaving." Val said, "Obviously." I said nothing because agreeing too loudly felt like it would count as a dare. We made it 6 yards down the platform before Theo said, "Maintenance tunnel." He pointed to a door with a broken padlock hanging like a tooth. "It connects to the carousel. 1 peek. Promise. 1 peek." That phrase is a landlord for every bad tenant in history. The door groaned, then gave. The tunnel smelled like wet concrete and the inside of a long-closed lunchbox. Pipes lined the walls, some wrapped in peeling foam that flaked like fish scales. Our footsteps moved ahead of us, adding a second group we couldn't see. The tunnel sloped gently down and Mira said, "I hear water." Val said, "I hear your camera strap squeaking." Theo said nothing, which is how you know he's thinking about the next switch he wants to flip. We hit a junction, left to the carousel, right to the employee break room if the peeling paint labels could be believed. Theo took left and we followed because momentum is also a choice. The air cooled the way it does near big empty spaces. We came out behind a half-wall backstage to the carousel, and I forgot how to feel for a second. Even empty, carousels look like motion. The horses were frozen mid-prance, paint scabbed and eyes either too glossy or not glossy enough. Mirrors around the crown had cracked into spider webs that caught our reflections and pulled them apart. Strings of bulbs haloed the roof. A few were broken, a few looked like they were concentrating on staying dark. Mira moved slowly around the platform, taking photos of each horse like a museum with a favorite child. Theo hopped up 1 step and then stopped, like he hit a membrane. Val whispered, "If that thing starts by itself, I am moving to a farm and learning to be a person who never goes out at night." As if called by the comedy gods, a ding sounded from somewhere above. Not the same chime. A smaller one. Then another. Then a low mechanical whine that sounded like a tired refrigerator changing its mind. The crown bulbs didn't switch on all at once. They woke in yawns, 2 here, 3 there, a blinking row that didn't quite make a pattern. I stepped back so fast I thunked the back wall. Mira didn't move. She raised the camera. The lens clicked. The mirror slapped. The carousel didn't spin. Thank whatever ghost gets credit. But the music started, thin, off-key, like a song somebody taught to a wind-up toy by humming through a paper comb. It played the melody wrong in exactly the same way each time, which is somehow worse than random wrongness. I realized my hands were in my pockets and took them out because I didn't want them to find anything in there that felt like an answer. We backed away, bumping into each other like a shopping cart with 4 drivers. In the tunnel, the sound narrowed to a tin line and then to nothing. Val let out a sound that would have been a laugh if it weren't wearing a helmet. Theo said, "Okay. That's my quota for haunted infrastructure. Let's bail." On the way out, we passed the sign for the break room again. Mira shot me the look she uses when she's pretending to ask for permission she's already taken. 2 minutes, she said. The human stuff in places like this is always the weirdest. The break room door stuck halfway, then surrendered with a belch of dust. The room was a time capsule arranged by raccoons. Lockers stood open like mouths with brackets for teeth. A vending machine listed to one side, its glass cracked into glitter. A bulletin board held the ghosts of memos in staple holes and brittle tape. The only color came from a shelf of old paper cups printed with rides and mascots, Sun Harbor's cartoon seal, smiling like it had never heard of lawsuits. On the table sat a stack of employee badges, laminated faces staring skyward. I brushed dust off one and read, Elena, carousel operator, under a photo of a woman with a smile like she was good at getting kids to stop crying. Mira took a photo. Val traced the edge of the badge with one finger like she was trying not to wake it up. Theo found a breaker panel in the corner. Don't, I said, even though he hadn't touched it. I'm not dumb, he said, which is what people say right before they do something dumb. He didn't flip anything. He closed the panel and said, see? Growth. We left the break room in a column of dust motes that followed us like a parade. Back in the open, the Midway dunked us in that planetarium darkness you only get when old bulbs refuse to glow and new stars are hiding. Val checked her phone and whispered, 3 a.m. Mira said, golden hour for ghosts. Theo said, let's see the wheel from the top of the amphitheater, there's a mound up there. The amphitheater sat like a crater with a stage at the bottom grown over by weeds that had ideas about their future. From the top row, we could see the whole park, the wheel, the coaster, the snack shacks slowly turning into bird hotels. The sky hung an inch above the rooflines and sounded like electricity even though nothing was humming. Mira checked her photos, squinting at the tiny screen. Reflections are weird, she said. Weird how? Val asked. Like the mirrors are one frame behind us. Or ahead of us, Mira said. Theo leaned back and put his hands behind his head, which is what you do when you want the universe to know you're available for nonsense. That's when we saw the lights. They weren't police. Patrol lights pulse, it's their thing. These glowed pure white, steady, and they were moving down the far end of the Midway toward us at walking speed, like someone carrying lanterns. I counted 2, then 3, then 4. They didn't bounce. They slid. It felt wrong in the way your stomach understands wrong, before your brain files paperwork. Theo sat up. Nope, he said. We cut around the amphitheater rim and back toward the fence at a briskness I would describe as motivated. Mira kept looking over her shoulder because she's the only one of us with courage that survives past the decision to run. The lights slowed near the carousel. We slowed too because we're human and curiosity is a magnet in our bones. In the quiet, we heard something else, footsteps on the boards. Not ours. These had weight and confidence. Val touched my sleeve so lightly it felt like a radio signal. We pressed into the shadow of a concession stand. The lights drifted into view between kiosks like two suns got lost at a fair. Inside the glow, outlines, shoulders, hats, the suggestion of people without faces. They paused at the carousel and one lifted what looked like a hand. The music stuttered, then stopped. The lights didn't flicker. After a long moment, the figures turned and kept drifting down the Midway away from us. They didn't look around. They didn't have to. We weren't the main characters of their night. We reached the fence with the grace of spilled groceries and missed the gap because panic does that to navigation. Finally Theo found the bowed panel and braced it while we slid through one by one. I snagged my jacket on a twist of wire and chose fabric over time, wrenching free with a sound like a small tragedy. We piled into the car, doors barely closed before Theo started it. Gravel coughed under the tires, and the lot threw us back onto the road like a carnival game that lets you win when it's done with you. Nobody spoke until we hit the highway. Then everybody did. What? Val said. What was that? Caretakers, Mira said, which somehow didn't reduce the mystery. Lights on sticks, Theo said, aiming for skepticism and landing on hope. Lanterns don't make stereo footsteps, I said. Silence fell in manageable pieces. The radio found a station playing a slow song that sounded like memory had opinions. We drove with the windows cracked an inch, because breathing felt like a team sport. We didn't mean to end up at the diner. But the car knew, the way your feet remember your childhood street. The waitress took one look at our faces and said, "Coffee's on the left," and slid a stack of menus at us like shields. We took a booth by the window because even when you're scared of what's outside, you want a window. Mira spread her camera on the table and scrolled through photos with both thumbs. "Look," she said. The carousel, lights yawning awake. The Ferris wheel, a circle cut out of the night. The amphitheater, a bowl of shadow. Then one of us from the hip, Val's beanie, Theo's profile, my jacket, Myra's hands. In the reflection of the window, a fifth blur, a height that didn't match, a shape like someone standing on the other side of glass. We stared at it long enough that the waitress refilled our coffee with the careful hands people use on diffusing conversations. "Could be a smear," Theo said. "Could be you bumped the lens with your sleeve." Mira shook her head. "Maybe. Could be anything." She flipped to a picture from the tunnel, a sign on the wall. "Elena," she said softly. "Carousel operator." Val drew a circle of condensation in her water glass and said, "I don't want to go back." "Same," I said, relieved to discover my courage had a friend. Theo ate 3 pancakes in a row and used the knife like he was drafting blueprints. "I want to pretend we didn't," he said. "But also, I want to know who turned the music off." "They didn't turn it off for us," Mira said. "They turned it off for the park." We lingered until the ache in our legs turned into a story shaped like a joke. The waitress gave us a box of fries, for the road, like a benediction. Outside, the sky had the kind of gray that pretends the sun is a rumor. Theo drove slower than usual and nobody commented because we were all grateful. At home, the night followed me in. I showered and the water ran rusty for a second, which I decided not to make into a metaphor. I put my jacket on a chair and found a ribbon of pink flagging tape stuck to the hem, the color faded to the exact shade of old bubble gum. I peeled it off and laid it on the counter, meaning to throw it away, then didn't. 2 days later, Mira sent a link to a news blurb. County crews had welded sections of the fence around Sun Harbor. "Hazard mitigation," it said. The photo in the article showed a worker in a high-vis vest carrying a spool of chain. In the background, the Ferris wheel looked the same as always, which is to say like the shape of an idea. Theo texted a photo of his hand with a tiny blister where he must have grabbed the fence too hard. "Souvenir," he wrote. Val replied, "Get a tetanus shot," and then a picture of the orange beanie folded on a shelf like a retired flag. I sent a voice memo of nothing, just the ambient hum of my apartment, and wrote, "Silence check." Nobody liked it, which felt respectful. Nights after that, I walked home a longer route that goes past the community center. Someone had set up a temporary fair in the parking lot, 3 slides, a ring toss, and a carny ride that spins you until you think your bones will alphabetize themselves. The music there was bright and cruel in the way happy songs can be when you're not in the mood. I stood behind the fence and watched kids run in circles like each lap made a promise. A girl tugged her dad's sleeve and pointed at the carousel, smaller and newer than Sun Harbor's, and said, "That one," with a seriousness I recognized. They rode. They went up and down and laughed in the precise way relief laughs when it thinks nobody can hear. I didn't hear Sun Harbor's melody anymore. Or I did, but it braided itself into the ordinary night until it felt like part of the weave. I still couldn't decide if the figures with the lights were security, caretakers, or something with a job that doesn't scan in modern terms. I liked all the answers. I liked that the park didn't spin for us. It didn't need us to be the kind of story that becomes a warning. A week later, we met at a breakfast place because meeting at night felt like borrowing trouble. Theo joked about getting everyone matching jackets with the words, "Better Choices Club." Mira showed us a new camera strap that didn't squeak. Val had a list titled, "Boundaries We Mean This Time," and read the first 3 items out loud. If you've never heard the sound of a group of friends trying to stay reckless in a way that doesn't get them killed, it's a bit like cutlery in a quiet room: clink, pause, laugh, repeat. Mira slid a photo across the table, printed on glossy paper because she likes things that exist even when phones die. It showed the carousel from behind the half wall where we first saw it. Lights off. Horses lined like patient animals waiting for a cue. Down near the edge of the frame, a shape that might be a figure and might be a trick of grain. Someone had written a note in the border in neat block letters, "Elena, probably." We sat there with our coffee cooling, the kind of reverence you don't plan settling over the table. It wasn't fear. It wasn't triumph either. It was more like the feeling when a joke lands harder than you meant and opens a door you didn't see, one that leads to a room where you have to be quiet for a second before you decide if you're staying. On the way out, Val put a few extra dollars under the sugar caddy because superstitions like that grow legs after nights like ours. Theo held the door for a family coming in and the littlest kid pointed at his blister and said, "Owie," with child-accurate empathy. Mira tucked the printed photo into the inside pocket of her jacket like a wallet-sized map. We didn't say we'd never go back. Saying never is a comma that invites a clause you don't want. We said we'd pick places with actual hours and friendly lights. We said we'd try beaches and rooftops and roads that don't have their own weather. We said a lot of things that sounded like promises and felt like hope. That night, the wind rattled my window and I heard something like a chime from the apartment above. I held still and counted to 3. Nothing followed. I lay back down, the ribbon of flagging tape on the dresser like a bookmark in a chapter I'll reread even if I don't want to admit it. When sleep came, it brought a dream where the carousel horses had dust on their eyelashes and the operator smiled and said, "Please keep your hands and feet inside," not as a threat but as a blessing. In the dream I obeyed, which might be growth, or might just be a better story than the one where we learn everything the hard way. In the morning, the city looked a half shade brighter. Sun on storefront glass made rectangles on the sidewalk that turned strangers into silhouettes playing hopscotch. A utility truck drove by with 2 orange lights flashing, ordinary as toast. I watched it go and thought about the lanterns that didn't bounce, the way careful footsteps sound like belief, and how some places keep their own hours even after the clocks are done. I texted the group a photo of nothing in particular and wrote, "Breakfast again next week," and everyone hearted it, because sometimes the bravest plan is just picking a future and standing near it until it starts to feel like yours. And because you'll ask, no, the music didn't follow me that day. It stayed where it belonged, under layers of dust and W.